Thank you. Welcome back to Senate Education, Friday, April 15th, 3:32. Our last work today is going to return to H703, which is the House Workforce Development Bill. We reviewed section 3 yesterday, and we had some suggestions and ideas for edits from the Agency of Education. I'm going to pass out to everybody so they have a section by section summary of the bill. It looks like there are, and this might be helpful to help there as well.
Yeah, I already got it.
Great. So it looks like there are a few more sections that are relevant to our work. And let's start with section 13. And I just really went through and thought, okay, we've done section 3, 2 and 3 yesterday. The other ones that look relevant to the world of education were sections 13, 14, and 15, and 16. And then there's some additional work. But if Mr. Hall, if you would tell us a little bit about 13, 14, 15, and 16, that would help us understand whether or not these are in our purview.
Sure. So good afternoon, David Hall, Legislative Counsel, coming to you from across the alleyway. Thanks for accommodating me via video, and sorry to not join you. I have a new COVID member of my household apparently as of this morning, so I thought I'd better.
Sorry to hear that.
It's okay. He's 17 and resilient. He'll be fine.
Okay.
But I don't want to make anybody sick inadvertently, so.
No, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Sure.
I hope he's okay.
Yeah, he's good. Thank you. I'm happy to talk about these sections. I did work on them. There are some hardcore education points in here about funding sources and processes that, I'm glad that the experts are in the room. But as far as the way 13 works, the idea underlying it is all in A, and it's this pilot project that would allow basically a high school student to take an adult CTE course, and it would fund the tuition cost of one course per student. And if the student turned out to be WIOA eligible, it would also it meets an income threshold, then would also be eligible for books and materials for funding. But basically you'll see, so A says the purpose is to provide funding for an eligible secondary. Do you want me to share my screen?
No, we have it right in front of us.
Okay.
We have
All
both the highlighted and we have the actual bill.
Great. So funding for an eligible secondary student to take an eligible adult CTE course. And under B, the courses have to be offered at a regional CTE center. And it has to qualify as an adult CTE or post-secondary career CTE course. It has to be it can be offered basically at any time. It could be summer, evening, or weekend while school's in session, or just as a summer course. It does have to be an element, and this is, I don't know if the wording is precise enough here for your world, but it says it has to be included as an element of the student's personalized learning plan and reasonably related to the student's career goals. And what limited discussion I heard on that point was, for instance, an automotive student wanted to take a welding class. That would be something that they could see fitting together. Any questions so far?
So I'm just curious. So right now, a high school student, you mentioned the welding class because they couldn't take a welding class?
Well, it's not because they can't take it. It's because this would ostensibly otherwise provide funding that they may not be able to use.
That's terrific. Thank you.
Yep. So an eligible student.
Senator Booker has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Do these students have to be in the technical ed, curriculum, or it could be anybody, like somebody could take a plumbing class?
Well, they could, as long as they meet all the eligibility criteria, but it is not a criterion that they be on like a CTE track per se, or tech ed or anything like that.
And you were talking about their goals, like it'd be great to learn plumbing. And maybe I'd decide I'd go into it, but I didn't have that idea to begin with. Maybe I wanted to be a surgeon instead, which is kind of like plumbing.
Internal plumbing.
Yeah, okay, just checking to make sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Senator Persley.
Is this all DOL money, federal money?
We'll come to that. There's actually sort of a dance that DOL and AOE are supposed to do to identify funding streams. So to be an eligible student, you have to be a Vermont resident at either a Vermont public school or an independent school that is eligible for public funding. It's for students who have completed grade 11 but have not received a diploma. So it's a pretty narrow window there. The student's secondary school and the CTE center have to determine that the student is prepared to succeed, they meet any prerequisites, and they have exhausted other sources of available funding prior to submitting an application. Any questions?
So I'm sorry if I missed this. Is this particularly for low-income students? Are we trying to give people access to dollars that wouldn't have the dollars otherwise? I thought we were trying to do that.
It doesn't necessarily have to be.
Okay.
When it says 3C has exhausted other sources of available funding prior to submitting an application, I guess, a question that comes to mind for me, I don't know the answer to this, is does that literally mean all funding, like your parents or yourself, and you have to demonstrate that you can't pay for it, and then you can come to the department or to the agency to seek other funding streams? I'm not sure that's what it means. I think they mean, whether they could move dollars from some other public source or some education specific source, but I don't know the actual answer.
Where do you see that language?
That is in C3C. So it's an eligibility criterion, and you have to have exhausted other sources of available funding.
Got it. I see. Dr. Boucher, do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. So the bottom line, actually, I would say, is that this should be being paid for by the local education dollars, because if it's a part of a student's PLP, it should be being picked up by their school district. But there was a small group of students, I believe from BBA, that were identified, or in Burton Academy, that were identified as not having access to adult education courses at Stafford Technical Center. So from the AOE's perspective, we're fine with this, but from our perspective, it's unclear like how much of a problem this is. And what we actually suspect is that it's really about, in a couple of places, just a breakdown in terms of communication between the local CTE, what's available, and making sure that what students want to do is part of their personalized learning plan, which is where that language comes from. So my understanding is that these are going to come from Vermont Department of Labor dollars, the $100,000, because labor was happy when working with Commerce to actually run this pilot to actually find out what the extent of the problem is, and then, as Councillor Hall said, see if they can qualify for WIOA dollars. So I'm not sure how that $100,000 would be deployed, if that would be something that, I mean, it's labor dollars, so I would assume it means $100,000 of typical WIOA funding that's been appropriated in this way. We would not have additional funding for students to come to at the agency level. Of course, we would actually say, no, this should actually be being picked up by your local school budgets. So we're not convinced there's a problem, but we're okay with looking into it, if that makes any sense.
Yep. Okay. Committee, any questions at this point regarding any of that? Mr. Hall, please continue.
Sure. So you'll see in D administration, DOL is going to consult with AOE and develop an application that includes, basically all of the necessary criteria to satisfy that you're eligible. So the flow here is that the CTE center works with the student. The CTE center is the one that actually, submits the final application to DOL on behalf of the student. Then in 3, this is part of the money flow. So DOL will first review the application and decide, do you meet federal and state funding that we might have available from WIOA, Title I, Vermont Youth Employment Program, et cetera. They'll also send a copy of the application to AOE. And by the letter of the law, AOE would, within 10 days, determine whether there was any AOE funding available and tell the department that. You'll see in 4 that the department would provide funding for the tuition cost for one course to eligible students, first come, first served basis, from state or federal resources that are available through the department or the agency, or if there isn't such funding available, then from the amounts available in DOL's FY23 budget, not to exceed $100,000. So again, we'll look for existing streams of funding at DOL and AOE. If we don't find them, then DOL is authorized to use up to $100,000 of its FY23 budget to pay for this. 5 is the part about WIOA eligible students being able to get books, supplies, exam fees, and equipment. And under 6, each regional CTE center is actually limited to $20,000 through the program for a fiscal year. So the rest is basically reporting. E is a regional CTE center report, F is an interim report, G is a final report.
Senator Ryan.
So on the funding from DOL, is this money going to be put into the budget in the first place, or is it where does it come from?
Yeah, all I can tell you is that DOL was part of the conversation where $100,000 of their money was allocated for this purpose in this bill. So what shakes out in the budget is above my pay grade, but DOL was involved in this conversation.
Okay, and then the other question is how this might fit with some of the current programs that are going on with kids in transition as they're moving from, high school and thinking about their next steps. Does it fit with any of the DOL programs that are currently ongoing there? I know DC, it's not DCF, it's Faber, but is there probably not a discussion on that?
Yeah, there are so many DOL programs.
I know, it's all over the place.
As the secretary said, I believe this is sort of a niche, a narrow gap they're trying to fill here.
Okay.
Okay. Please continue.
Sure. Are you ready to move on to section 14?
Yes.
Okay. So now we have sort of 2 programs, 14 and 15, that are focused on different sides of being involved in the trades. So 14 is sort of on the front end, and this is a scholarship program through Vsac for tuition, exam fees, and initial licensing fees for eligible students. The thought here being that some students have a hard time, once they finish or when they're near finishing school, of making the jump to a career because there are barriers to either finish paying for their education, paying for the exams, paying for initial licensure. So that's the gap that this is trying to fill. You'll see in B, To be eligible for a scholarship, you have to be enrolled in an industry recognized training and certification program that leads to initial employment or career advancement. And it's in sectors: building, mechanical, industrial, medical trade, clean energy, energy efficiency, weatherization, clean transportation. I appreciate that those are extremely broad and not specified in scope, and I presume Vsac will have to determine, the actual details of what would qualify.
Senator Lyons.
Just probably stepping back as well as going forward, is there anything in any of this that looks at equity of access, so gender equity? And because some of these trades and these CTE programs are sometimes dominated by boys and rather than girls, so I'm just wondering if there was any thought on trying to encourage equity.
I am not aware of anything in this bill that speaks specifically to gender equity, and not.
Okay.
That's a great question. I think that would be a really great amendment.
And
Yeah, really
good,
great
I'm with
amendment.
you on that. Cool.
Awesome. That came up either here in another or some conversation.
Yeah,
I'm so glad
that
you raised
happened.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
Senator Hooker reminded me that plumbing is not
Right,
also doing.
great.
I'm on page 25 of 68 now, just going through the rest of the eligibility criteria. So you have to demonstrate financial need, though there are no more specific parameters on what that is. It's not a function of AMI or anything like that. You have to register with DOL for the purpose of job referrals. And 4, you have to agree to work in the profession for a minimum of 1 year following licensure or certification for each year of the scholarship awarded. So, they'll implement that. C1 and 2, there's this concept of giving preference to students attending Vermont-based training programs, or if one isn't available, one that employment opportunity with a Vermont employer, and priority for applicants who have not received other assistance. I mean, giving any kind of geographic preference, sort of sets off a little bit of an alarm bell for me, but I don't know how big of a deal it is. Under the Dormant Commerce Clause, you're not really allowed to prefer in-state versus out-of-state interests. But is somebody going to sue to overturn a $3 million program? I don't know. It's at least something I need to flag for you as your lawyer.
Okay.
Under D, there's no scholarship deadline. It's a rolling application, and the money stays with Vsac until it's exhausted. And you'll see in E that FY23, it's $3 million general fund dollars for this purpose.
Okay.
Any questions?
Senator Chittenden.
I'm not sure I followed that point you flagged, but would it be at all better if we just use reciprocity so that that we would recognize and allow this to go to states that also allow the same coming back, or is that question off base?
It's a fair question. It's not quite addressing the problem. It's not that you can't use this money to attend, for instance, a New Hampshire-based program. You could, but this is purporting to give preferences to Vermont-based training programs or Vermont-based employers. And so the Dormant Commerce Clause argument would go, we're using state dollars to benefit in-state business interests to the detriment of out-of-state business interests, both by paying for, employee or education and facilitating hiring and giving preferences for our businesses versus somebody else's, when there's may not be a legitimate reason to, not have equal footing, whether a student wants to go across the river or down to Massachusetts or not for this purpose. So it's it's probably a relatively minor risk given the scope of the program and the target population, but I have to flag it.
I thought the dormant commerce clause, I thought we would be in violation if we said you can just go to New Hampshire. Because then you're discriminating against 48 other states. You're saying all these dollars can just have to stay in state. We do that with a lot of programs.
No, they don't have to, but
Okay.
But it's just talking about giving a preference to Vermont-based
I see.
programs that receive the
Okay.
money.
Okay.
Anyway,
Let's do section 15 and then we'll wrap.
okay. Well, so this is sort of the other side of the Vermont trades, but this one is interesting. I mean, from what I understand from public testimony and the work that was done, the purpose here is to motivate people who may not necessarily have gone into the trades or gone to school for the trades to be able to get loan payment reimbursement if they end up working in the trades. Do you see what I mean? So even if I went to law school, but then decided I wanted to go work in construction, this program would offer loan repayment reimbursement to me to pay off my law school loans for every year that I work in construction. So that's the biggest picture view. Again, it's a Vsac program. It is subject to whatever money is appropriated. This does have money appropriated. Basically, you have to be a Vermont resident, and under B2, as I said, you have to be employed. It's the same occupations as above. It's building, mechanical, industrial, medical, clean energy, energy efficiency, weatherization, clean transportation, average of 30 hours per week for a full calendar year. And that's before you apply. So you are accruing years in the trade, and then you are paying your loan during that time, but then you come back to Vsac and you say, all right, I've worked in clean energy for 1 year. I've made X dollars of loan payments. I would now like to be reimbursed for that under this program. So you'll see for every year of work in qualifying occupations, individuals eligible for up to $5,000 per year in loan reimbursement. You can't get more than you actually owe in education debt. Under D, again, this is rolling and it's as money allows, first come, first serve. E, this is only $500,000 in the general fund. So I'm not sure what the target population is or how many people they, well, you can do the math, but it's up to $5,000 per year per person. So it's not a lot.
Yeah.
100 people.
Any questions on 15? So I do think this is, so we'll have you back in on Tuesday. Daphne will schedule you to wrap it up there. I'll talk with Senator Sorokin, but I would encourage committee members, there's some opportunity here if you have some concerns to make adjustments. I think Senator Lyon's idea of the gender equity piece is great, but there are other things. If you don't think these programs would fly, or if you think there's a better use of these dollars, please let us know. Dr. Boucher, any final comments before we wrap for the weekend?
Just that section 14 and section 15, the administration strongly supports. We have a problem with trades employment in the state in general. And so these are trying to entice more folks to enter the trades.
Thank you.
Can I ask
Please,
a question?
yeah, you bet.
A quick question. As the trades were identified, one of the things that we are concerned about is having sufficient workforce in each of the areas that we look at. And are each of these areas places where we have a workforce deficit? So I'm looking at weatherization, energy efficiency, clean transportation, medical trades. I guess we do have mechanical, industrial. So do we know that we're missing workers in each of those areas?
Not the best person to answer that, but from what I have heard, so we definitely have shortages, I'm sure everyone knows, in the medical professions. Not so sure about medical technicians, but this came out of commerce and they probably have a much better sense of those shortages than we do in education. In terms of the others, I believe what that's trying to get at is also ensuring that we have enough skilled crafts and tradespersons for the work needed ahead regarding environmental sustainability.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Boucher, as you know, we are deeply concerned about the number of openings already for teachers. You know, we have 1,000 openings this fall, likely to grow. We know there's nothing in this bill addressing it. We're working on language in another bill, but if you think there's something that could be done in here, please come back to us and let us know.
Sure, and I believe
If you go ahead.
well, I believe Secretary French discussed that with the committee yesterday. It's
He did.
possible,
He did.
sure.
Yeah.
It's possible that depending on what happens with this particular bill, that you know, it's possible that something is, you know, contingent on what he said yesterday, that perhaps his understanding is there's a separate vehicle for what's happening with
No, he's
the
absolutely
educator
right.
workforce.
I'm just wondering if that's going to be enough, really, something to think about. You know, that separate vehicle that we're working on, I'm not sure if that really represents all hands on deck for possibly 1,500 openings in the fall. That's just my worry. And if there's something else you can think of that might be put in this bill or the other bill, please let us know.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you both very much. Hope you have a good weekend. Daphne, if you want to take us off, that would